Welcome to Barnes & Noble Union Square. My name is Charles. I'm the events manager. We'd like to thank you for coming to our home tonight for this very special evening. First, I'm going to go ahead and bring on our moderator. She is a stand-up comedian and New York Times best-selling author and an actress. She is the co-creator and co-star of Two Dope Queens. It's okay, you can make some noise for that. She just inked a deal with ABC to launch her own production company. Welcome to the stage, Miss Phoebe Robinson. She's going to go ahead and lead a Q&A. We remind you it is a question and answer. We're all super fans, and we appreciate that, but share that story for later. We're here for questions today.
Yes, let them fucking know. Personal level's very stressful.
Go ahead. Say what you want. All right, now our guests of the hour. They have been together for, well, a long time. They've been together for over 20 years. There we go. They've sold over 1 million records and released 8 studio albums. They've won 3 Juno Awards. They've gotten a Grammy nod. They received the Governor's General's Performing Arts Award. That's a lot of words. And in 2018, they received the New York Civil Liberty Union Award. In 2016, they created the Tegan and Sara Foundation, which fights for health, economic justice, and representation for LGBTQ girls and women. Welcome, Tegan and Sara.
Closer relationship because you nicknamed her and it's making me sensitive, so I need you to on the spot make a nickname for me.
Sara?
Sara. I accept Sara.
Thanks for having me come to, I know, it's like you're right there and right there. So
do not forget who this event is about.
I'm excited that you have me come moderate this because I got to read the book and I thought it was phenomenal and I adore you guys. We've known each other for a couple of years. So I'm so excited to be here for, this is your first book, high school. That's very amazing that you guys did, so congratulations on that. That's incredible.
Thank you. You know that before you will remember this, I hope, or you'll be like, oh, that's who called me, but
no, you called me.
I called you when you were thinking about doing the book, and I asked your advice because your book, well, now you have 2, but your first book was amazing. And,
thank you.
And
the second one was trash. No,
but at the time you only had put out 1, and I called you to ask your advice, and you gave such solid, amazing advice.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just like, get that money, girl.
Yeah.
Because writing this book is hard. But yeah, we're all authors now, and
yes, we are.
I know, which is really cool to say. And whenever I talk to the people who write books, I'm always very curious about what they choose to write about. And you guys chose to write about your high school years, which I think for kind of everyone that was a very sort of stressful 4 years, and maybe not something they necessarily want to relive. But what about that time made you guys feel like this is where this book should be?
Well, I think that, first of all, I think it was more stressful for you guys because it was 4 years. Like in Canada, high school is 3 years, first of all. So
that's just
start there.
It's dragged out.
Yeah, it dragged out in America. Like, holy smokes. No, but I think, knowing who our audience is, knowing spending 20 years with this wonderful community of people, I think we knew that there was this desire to know more about us before we were public figures. And I think, because our adolescence and high school specifically was the time where we really, where we developed our songwriting, where we started our first bands, where we made our first sort of steps onto the public stage. It was a no-brainer to go back to that time and to look at that music and to look at that sort of experience. But it also coincided with when we started to address our sexuality, and I think those things are so intrinsically linked, are like who we are as artists, but also who we are as people and as queer women. And I think we spent a lot of years talking in the press about our sexuality, and we are very prideful, and we are activists, and we are very confident. But for myself, there was a desire to talk about the complexities of queerness and identity, and being a part of any sort of marginalized community, and the internalized homophobia and the sort of trauma of that before I sort of was an adult person who could advocate for myself. And I know that I felt that part of my story would be something that would be potentially useful or of a comfort to the people that are in our community. And so that was really compelling to want to spend time with young Tegan and Sara. And Tegan has been.
I just wanted the money, and I was like, people love teenagers. The 90s are so hip right now.
Hello, Tegan. That's serious. I want Tegan. I want to pass this to you though for a second. You said something really wonderful today about how we all look back at our teen years and the way we talk about ourselves as adolescents. You said something really beautiful today. It's the nicest thing I've ever said.
Literally, the goodness people are filming this. Well, I think we could all agree we're pretty hard on ourselves, and just because you're an adult doesn't mean you stop being hard on yourself. And I think what I've heard over and over again the last 18 months, every time we tell people about doing this, is some version of, why on earth would you want to return to that time? It was a terrible time. Adolescence is awful. Everything I created, especially creatives, but all of us, take photos or journal or write ourselves, and everyone says the same thing. Ugh, burn it, hide it, I hope no one ever sees it. I was so ugly, I was terribly dressed, I had acne, I felt so bad about myself. And we felt that way too. And then the longer I worked on the book, and the more I watched the footage we found from that time, the more I looked at the photos, and the more that I read what I had written, the more I liked myself. And the more I wanted to be empathetic to that young person. I had so much joy. I had lots of fear too, but I just wanted the best for my friends, for my family. I had my whole world in front of me, and it was so sad to me that I'd spent 20 years being embarrassed of that person. And I hope by writing this book that all of us, whether you're young or old, can just lighten up on yourself a little bit. I know it's easy to say that, but it's the one thing we all have in common, is we all started out so innocent and simple and sweet, and somewhere along the way we learned to dislike ourselves and criticize ourselves, and I just wish we wouldn't do it so often. And I hope this book can at least teach us that, or inspire you not to feel so mean to your younger self. Go back and look at those photos and just remember that's the youngest you'll ever be again. Like your baby skin. I might have had acne, but I look at my photos where I think I look disgusting at times. But I'm like, no wrinkles. Wow. Those black circles, I wasn't born with them. They literally came in my 30s. I don't know, so that's, yeah.
No, I think that's great, and there's so much that I want to dive into the book about. I want to talk first about selves. No, but
I keep avoiding eye contact with the parents with children because I'm like, oh Lord, here we go.
No, but I'm truly not trying to be, salacious or whatever. What I am really intrigued about is because I don't really do anything, like I barely drink whatever, and you guys had an interview where you talked about that female representation in terms of drug use is it's never a positive thing when girls use drugs, which I was just like, oh yeah, that's so true. Like boys, it's they're just having fun, self-discovery, but women aren't allowed that. So for you guys to be so open about your experiences as teenagers, it made me wonder
if you could do LSD.
Yeah. But I'm curious, was it sort of your intention when you wrote this book that you were trying to be this sort of positive representation of how girls and women can use drugs and it doesn't mean they're a bad person, they're being naughty or rebelling.
Maybe it's not even positive, it's just honest. I mean, the truth is that I don't think either of us have been hiding this like illicit drug use in our past. It's been a long ass time since we did drugs. I mean, I sometimes do drugs now, but like not acid. Although, oh my god, I did edibles before Christmas, it was a nightmare. Don't ever do that.
Should not stop talking
It's
about
just,
it.
it's
I never done edibles, and I'm just gonna say, based on her experience, I would just say like, don't.
never ever. It's profoundly frightening things.
I did it once and I was like, hard pass.
Sorry to the edible community. All the edible sponsors for our tour are like, get the brownies out of here. Like, so. Hi, Sarah. Okay, so I think that it was important for us to talk about drugs and alcohol and our experimentation with them because it was complicated, and I don't know if we fully knew at the time why we were drawn to these like high-risk behaviors. What I can tell you is that I was extremely depressed, I was very anxious, I felt a lot of shame, and when I took drugs and when I drank, there was a brief moment for me anyways where I would sometimes forget that I hated my body, forget that I felt obsessed and scared about my feelings about girls. Instead of fighting with Tegan, I would be sort of returned to this kind of childlike, joy-like place of loving each other and
It's like an infomercial for acid.
having.
I returned to my joy-like place.
Yeah, I did. But this is what I will say. Those moments they were not always like that. It was really scary. I would have taken mentorship or a community. I would have rather parental supervision that didn't scare me away from myself. Like, I mean, there's so many other things I would have chosen over acid. But I think the significant part of including it in our story, Tegan has been speaking about this a lot, but like, men do get to talk about their creative brains being opened by drugs. Our creative selves were certainly, we cannot, like, I can't lie and not say like, hey, I did drugs and I kind of felt like, whoa, life is amazing. And then I started writing songs. I guess there's a link for me. But what I will say is this, we replaced drugs and alcohol with music. When we found out that we could speak to the things that were stressing us out and making us anxious, to the stories about the girls that we were dating or our hearts getting broken, for me, that became a sort of self-medication as well, but it was like positive. And it was a way for me to sort of like connect to Tegan and connect to the people that were, in our friend circle or our family and friends or whatever it was. So I'm not advocating for drugs, but I didn't want to leave it out of the story.
Fine, let it go next time. I think also there's this feeling, and I'm sure you can relate to this, but I feel like sometimes as women, it's like we have to be perfect. And we've really started to see that change, but I wanted this book and this new era of Tegan and Sara to inspire a little more, like Sara used the word honesty, but like also just like more realness, like more like I was a three-dimensional person as a young person. I think young people get treated so like I feel like we're patronizing young people, and I think young women especially, it's like all we ever hear about young women is like diaries and their period and they like boys and their science marks go down, and then it's like we're gonna ignore you till you're in your late 30s and then we care about you for like 2 seconds and then you're too old, get out of the way. And I just wanted to add to the narrative. I wanted us to be complex. We were going through a lot. We experienced a lot as young people and we had a lot to say, and I felt like drugs were a part of that, and I didn't want to write a how-to, but I also didn't want to pretend like it didn't really impact us and also shape who we were. Like, I think we don't do drugs as adults because we did experiment as young people and realized that it wasn't for us. And our career took precedence over, that. And I wanted to be honest. So it was also really inexpensive. And it lasted a really long time. LSD is like actually a lot of bang for your buck.
We were always very fiscally responsible.
I didn't want to get a job, and I didn't have a driver's license, so I only got $15 a week allowance, and that's...
Okay, now you're doing it. Let me tell you what I would do. I would start on Tuesday with $5.
So one of the things that I really enjoyed about the way you guys wrote the book is you each took, an essay and which I'm like, I wish I had someone.
You and I laughed about this because
Yeah.
when I called you, you're like, oh, I'm so behind on deadline. I'm like so behind, and I was like, oh, I got Sara to write half the book.
So jealous of that. But what I really like about the book is so much of it is about memory, and a lot of times it's you sort of repeat stories to yourself, and that's how you remember them, whether or not they're based in fact. And you sort of, I think it was Sara in the beginning, you wrote about how you.
What's my nickname?
Sara. Sara, you wrote about how you thought something that happened to Tegan, but it was actually happened to you. Or no, wait, or is it Teagues? Okay, so Teagues, you wrote about how you thought something happened to Sara. Oprah does not do this at all. She's much better. But anyway, I just think it's interesting how memory can sort of play with your perception, not only your own life, but each other. And I think so much of your relationship that you wrote about during your high school years was, there's obviously that bond, naturally you're twins, but there was a lot of back and forth. And so what do you remember about your relationship to each other, and looking back on it now, you're like, oh, I was maybe too hard on my sister about this?
I mean, it's interesting because when we started doing research for the book, we talked to a lot of our friends from high school, reached out to people we hadn't talked to, found all this VHS footage for the young people. That's those giant tapes that used to go in the VCR.
They were always broken.
Yeah. We had all this footage, we had all this tape, we had all these, it just had so much content that we really documented a lot of our adolescence. And the thing that struck me in the footage was that Sara and I were so affectionate with one another. She called me Tiki, and she was always putting her arm around me. And I know there's a lot of people here in the audience whose faces are very familiar, who's known us for 20 years and seen a zillion shows, and that's not how we are. We aren't super affectionate. It's kind of a joke amongst our close friends and colleagues and family. We rarely hug. And there's a complex web of reasons why I think our relationship went the way that it has in adulthood. Part of it is that we spend a nauseating amount of time together and an astronomical amount of time doing business together, and there's a professional air that has to come to get through so much. But I was really sad when I saw the footage initially because something was really lost in the last 20 years between Sara and I. And when we were kids, we were hard on each other, and we were tough, and we beat the shit out of each other sometimes, and we were mean, and we were each other's worst critic, but we were each other's confidant, And we didn't speak necessarily always to each other, but we were always there for each other. We went everywhere together. We were each other's shadow, really. And I felt sad because I think that the narrative that we've taken up in the last 20 years is that we're not that close. And going back and reading and seeing all that time and or seeing everything from that time, I was like, we might have been really angry at each other and pounding on each other's doors. You'll read the book and you'll see this. We fight constantly in high school, but we also were inseparable. It was tough to get us to be apart, and it made me sad because I think we're really hard on each other now. So I'm leaving the band so we can repair ourselves. I'm going to focus on my other career now. I'm an author.
You're gonna write a whole book by yourself.
I'm going to write a whole book all by myself. I've been sitting on it for 20 years. I have this whole idea. Sara knows it. She understands, but we're going to be closer now, and I'm going to be Tiki again. She's going to be Sara. And you're just all going to live with the memory of what was and what could have been, maybe not, in this book.
Sara, what would you say you felt like you were maybe too hard on Tiki about?
I don't know, but I will say that one of my...
Yeah, it feels a bit like therapy.
One of my... Lighten it back up. It's going to be serious. It's going to be fun. We've got a short amount of time. We've got to get it all in. Okay.
The truth is that I think, at least for me, what was therapeutic and clarifying about the book is that it sort of did give me some understanding of why I shut off from Tegan, and probably from a lot of my family, actually, because I was really scared of the truth of my sexuality and what I was doing, and I felt really bad. And I think that I interpreted my mother and Tegan in their interest in me as more of
An intrusion.
I felt like they were intruding, but I think it was that I thought Tegan knew. And I thought that she was embarrassed of me or ashamed of me, or she was trying to stop me from doing what I was doing. And I think that wall came down, and I think that when I started to realize that Tegan was also gay, which I think I did already sort of know, but when I really started to like name it, like when I was like, Tegan is also gay, I'm gay, Tegan's gay, I was like not comforted by that. I actually felt really scared because I was like, now I have to be scared for both of us. And I have to worry, all the things I'm worried about for myself, I now am worried about for Tegan. And I just remember this like hopelessness of like,
Or like Oprah's, look, she almost cried.
God, I'm not crying, I'm still emotional, don't be, I'm like ovulating, okay? People are like, we knew it, it's not a book about drugs, put them in the period section of the book. Anyways, but I that is truthfully something that I don't know if I really had ever articulated that before, but my childhood was stressful because I was scared for myself, but I was also really scared for Tegan, and I found it amusing and also really distressing when I started reading her chapters because I was like, why, like there was actually this moment where I went to my therapist and I was like, is it possible? Is it truly possible that I have been carrying this burden and this shame and this anxiety and Tegan like didn't get even one drip of that? Like how is that like fucking possible? Like does that not seem like unfair to you? Like that there's this like absurd imbalance, like is she just like completely out to lunch? Like is she not, you know, and I remember just feeling like this, I mean I was sort of amused by it, but I also like, there was a part of me I think that always knew that I was sort of carrying the weight for both of us, or the reality of it for both of us, even our coming out. I came out, my coming out was not great. It was not an awesome coming out. And then my family recalibrated, and Tegan came out, and it was delightful. She got for real. And I'm not, this is like, I'm not trying to drag my mom.
You know what, that was a really bad relationship, so I got it.
Hey, if you want to disclose that, that's on you, but like, I'm just like, whether the relationship is good or not, I think that, you know, I was sort of amazed that my family recalibrated, and they were like, oh shit, Tegan's gay too, let's get her a couch and a plant. We're gonna move her out, and we love you no matter what, unconditional love. And I just was like, like, let's just rewind 6 months, like, what the hell? So I think, you know, it was good for me to kind of go back and really process that stuff. Because I think the more I process that stuff, it's like Tegan said, watching the video of us when we're teenagers, I did find it was like exposure therapy. The more that I lived in those moments, the more that I watched those videos, the more that I allowed myself to feel grief, to feel anger, to feel shame, I started to feel better. And I do feel better. I do. I feel better knowing that that's why I changed the way that I behaved, which I guess is a long way of saying, I guess I'm sorry. I'm sorry that I didn't tell my mom when she asked me. I'm sorry that I didn't go to Tegan's room like an after-school special and say, Tiki,
Am I doing it now?
No. I mean, in some weird alternate universe, I did go into the room and say, I'm sorry, like, I've been lying to you and I'm gay, and like, maybe that would have made my life easier. I don't know, but you know, it is what it is.